welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has expressed hope that the United States would meet China halfway to prepare for high-level interactions between the two nations. During a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Wang has emphasized the importance of the long-standing relationship between Presidents Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, calling it a valuable strategic asset. Argentina's currency and bonds surged following a strong election victory by Javier Milei's La Libertad Avanza party, reassuring investors about the future of pro-market reforms. The peso strengthened by over 8% against the dollar, while yields on Argentina's dollar debt dropped below 10%. Brazil's President Lula da Silva says U.S. President Donald Trump has assured him a trade agreement that can be reached to ease punitive tariffs. Lula spoke after meeting Trump on the sidelines of the Southeast Asian Summit. Russian President Vladimir Putin has stated that Russia's relations with North Korea are progressing as planned during a meeting with North Korean Foreign Minister Choi Son-hui at the Kremlin. A video posted on the Kremlin's Telegram account showed Putin greeting Choi with a handshake, expressing confidence in the bilateral ties. After U.S. slammed Russia on the test of Burevestnik missile, Russia countered stating it notified U.S. in advance. Kremlin has also stated it guided by their own national interests and that there is nothing to strain relations with Washington. The UN has called for an immediate ceasefire in El Fasher, Sudan, warning that civilians are cut off from food, healthcare, and safe escape routes as fighting intensifies. Aid agencies say targeted attacks on hospitals and humanitarian workers are deepening the crisis. Hurricane Melissa has intensified into a Category 5 storm heading towards Jamaica and the Caribbean, with officials warning of catastrophic flooding. The storm has already claimed at least 4 lives in the Haiti and the Dominican Republic, where heavy rains and landslides have caused widespread destruction. Lithuanian Prime Minister Inga Ruginin has announced that Lithuania will shoot down smuggler balloons from Belarus after 4 airspace closures in a week caused by contraband-laden balloons. The Prime Minister has warned that Belarus that this may invoke NATO Article 4 security consultations. Now we start with China and U.S. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has announced that China and the United States has reached a framework consensus on trade issues. This agreement has been made through economic and trade talks that were held in Malaysia's Kuala Lumpur last weekend. According to Chinese state media, Wang Yi has told U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio that both countries agreed on reciprocal solutions to tackle current pressing economic challenges. Additionally, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun has earlier stated that at a press briefing today that the discussions between U.S.-China negotiations were in-depth and constructive. Let's listen into some of his other remarks at the issue.
关于中美经贸磋商，中方已经发布了消息。此次经贸磋商中，双方以两国元首重要共识为引领，围绕共同关心的重要经贸问题， 进行了坦诚、深入、富有建设性的交流磋商，就解决各自关切的安排达成基本共识。双方同意进一步确定具体细节，并履行各自国内批准程序。具体的问题建议向中方的主管部门进行询问。
Moreover, China's international trade representative has mentioned that U.S.-China talks in Kuala Lumpur covered key issues such as export controls, tariffs, and law enforcement cooperation. These discussions aim to prepare for the highly anticipated meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday in South Korea. The latest developments in U.S.-China trade talks have sparked optimism in the markets. Wall Street has reportedly opened at record high today, as investors now hope the U.S.-China truce could lead to stability in U.S.-China trade relations. Now for this discussion, we welcome David K. Johnston. He's an American author, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, David, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how does the U.S.-China framework consensus reflect Trump's America First trade strategy and its effectiveness?
Well, the Chinese actually have a stronger hand to play here than the United States does. Donald has said he's imposing tariffs, which he has no constitutional authority to do, but he is forcing the collection of them at the border, and people paying them are filing under protest with a request for a refund. But the U.S. needs things China has very badly, more than China needs things the U.S. has. In particular, things like neodymium and other rare earths that are necessary for modern electronics, whether they're consumer electronics or military weaponry. And so we haven't seen any details of this outline of an agreement, but it's very common with Donald that he talks about, well, I have a concept of how to do something or an outline of something. Eventually, we should see an actual document to see who gave up what or is expected to give up what to resolve these differences.
And in what ways might Trump perceive China's call for, as today earlier we saw them calling for a multipolar world as a challenge to his administration's global economic influence?
Well, Donald believes that he should run the whole world. He's literally said that. And so he expects other people to dance to his tune and do what he tells them to do. And President Xi, who is a highly educated, highly disciplined national leader who has been leading China now for a decade, he's going to be much smarter about how to negotiate this. He has people with real negotiating skills and does himself, unlike Donald, who brags about his deal-making capacity, but which, as I've shown in my books and columns over the years, it's just a fiction. It's one of the many things he just makes up his own reality.
What do you think, how would this upcoming summit go? You know, while there's a huge lack of experience and also, as you said, education in between these upcoming summits from the people who are attending it from U.S. side and Chinese side?
Well, both countries have an interest in bringing about an end to this. And in Trump's case, he needs very much to show that he's gotten some benefit. In America right now, sales of soybeans by our farmers in the Midwest have gone from $13 billion last year to zero today, and unless something changes, zero in all future years, because China is now able to get all the soybeans it wants from Argentina, Australia, and Brazil and other countries. So both sides will have an interest in being able to say, we got something to save face and smooth things over, but we just don't have enough information to know what, if anything, will actually grow out of this meeting.
And how could Trump leverage the reciprocal trade solution in his domestic political messaging ahead of elections?
Well, Trump is, of course, always promoting his mercantilist 17th century economics, where a dollar that India has or China has or Japan has is a dollar the U.S. doesn't have, and we need to take it, rather than understanding that we've become very good as a species at creating wealth. Not so good at distributing it, but at creating it. And so his own misunderstanding of world trade, of manufacturing, supply chains, all those related things, make it difficult for Donald to come to some kind of a resolution of this. He does have people around him who know what they're doing if he'll allow them to do their work. And his message back home will be, even if he comes away in a clear deficit position relative to President Xi, he will, of course, claim that this was the greatest negotiation ever and there's never been such a great trade deal in the history of the world.
Right. And lastly, David, what risks and opportunities does Trump face in balancing constructive trade talks with his tough stance on tariffs and its economic coercion?
Well, The Chinese are in as I said, a strong position. And the Chinese have a very big interest in dominating that quarter of the world where more than half the world population lives. So they have been pressing ahead with deals. They've gotten Australia, which had always been Washington's most loyal lapdog, at least since 1940, to pivot a little bit toward Beijing. And so the Chinese are in a position to make deals going around the United States, and they're busy doing that right now. That was part of the reason for the meeting in Shanghai with President Modi, Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, where they went out of their way to humiliate Donald Trump with some of the photos opportunities that they set up. So the Chinese also are very patient. Unlike American politics, which is based on 2-year election cycles and 90-day corporate earnings reports, the Chinese operate on the theory that we're here for forever and eventually we will get what we want if we play our hand well and stick to our principles.
Right. Thank you very much, David K. Johnston, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this region. Now, Virginia is emerging as the newest front in a growing mid-decade redistricting battle sparked by the U.S. President Donald Trump, as Democrats in Richmond consider joining California in efforts to reconfigure congressional maps to their benefit. Democratic leaders have called Virginia lawmakers into a special session to debate a plan aimed at countering Republican efforts to boost their U.S. House seats through recent redistricting moves in multiple red states. The Republicans, including Trump, have openly admitted that the new congressional maps in Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina are designed to secure their narrow U.S. House majority in the 2026 midterm elections. Democrats have condemned the redistricting efforts as Trump's attempt to manipulate next year's highly contested races, where Democrats only need to flip 3 Republican seats to regain the U.S. House majority. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back David K. Johnston. He's an American author, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, David, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how might Trump's endorsement of aggressive redistricting in red states influence the 2026 midterm elections, and could this be possible?
Well, normally we redistrict after each census, and the only exceptions to that I can recall ever studying or writing about involved maps that were thrown out because they violated the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and there had to be new districts drawn to avoid racial gerrymandering. The efforts here are going on over the country where the Republicans started this and the Democrats said, well, we're going to play the same hardball game you're playing. This is not good for the Republic. I think, however, the Republicans are making a big mistake, and this is a contrarian view. But where you redistrict so that you can get black Democrats in the South voted out of office by changing the boundaries, you also run the risk that Democrats can win, because you're going to take districts that are maybe 54, 55, 56% Republican, and you're going to have to dilute them so that they're 51 or 52% Republican. That means if the Democrats can get the vote out, which they have not been very good at in recent years, they can defeat Republicans. That is, they could turn the redistricting effort in red states and southern states into an opportunity to win even more seats in Congress, provided they get out the vote in the newly crafted districts.
And how do you think, in what ways could Trump frame Democratic counter-redistricting efforts in Virginia as a political attack on his base?
Well, that's exactly what he is doing, what you've described. I mean, first of all, his surrogates have been describing the Democratic Party as not a political party at all, but an extremist organization. They have suggested that the Democratic Party is completely legitimate. They won't even call it the Democratic Party. They call it the Democrat Party, which is a subtle slur against the Democratic Party. Donald operates very much on the system of do as I say, not as I do. And you see this in the redistricting fights around the country. It's woken up a number of Democrats, however, to say, we're not going to continue to pose as the really good guys. We're going to get down and dirty with you and adopt your approach and tactics for this election, only for this next coming election.
And lastly, David, what strategic advantages or risks does Trump face if redistricting battles becomes a central issue in the 2026 campaigns?
Well, I find it hard to imagine that it would be a central issue. Americans, as the great political scientist V.O. Key showed over 60 years ago, A, vote their pocketbooks, and secondly, tend to vote on visceral issues like how's my job, how's the economy going, not on rather academic and high intellectual issues like the drawing of district boundaries for congressional districts. That's just not an issue that moves voters. But if the Republicans have miscalculated and the Democrats get out the vote, instead of just winning 3, 4, 5 seats that would put the Democrats back in control of the House, it's entirely possible they could win several dozen seats, have a significant majority, and really stymie Trump's next 2 years, as well as running investigations of him.
Right, we'll be eyeing that all. Thank you very much, David K. Johnston, for joining us as an American author and sharing that insight all the way from New York. Now we stay in the region. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced that he will be meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week at the APEC summit in Kuala Lumpur. Carney has also expressed openness to resuming trade talks with U.S. President Donald Trump, but has emphasized that he would only agree to deals that benefit Canadians. Let's listen into the statement made by the Canadian Prime Minister.
Look, we stand ready to sit down with the United States, myself with the President, my colleagues with their colleagues, when the U.S. is ready to sit down. And why, from the perspective of the federal government, which I'm responsible, we stand ready to pick up on those discussions when the United States wishes to pick up on those discussions. So, as I always would be, as you would expect, as President of the United States, so of course, make myself available. I make myself available for other world leaders as they wish to. We will both be in APEC. Canada's a member of APEC. I mean, we are ready to have discussions when the Americans wish to have those discussions. But we're not, obviously we don't dictate the timing of that.
Relations with the U.S. have soared recently after Trump cut off trade talks over a controversial Ontario political ad and imposed additional tariffs on Canadian goods. Carney, on his first official visit to Asia, is working to reduce Canada's reliance on the U.S. by pursuing new trade deals in the Indo-Pacific. He has also revealed that Canada plans to start negotiations for a free trade agreement with the Philippines and aims to expand its trade relationship with other Asian countries. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, how might Canada's engagement with China at the APEC summit influence its trade strategy in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, it's Prime Minister Carney who took a subtle dig there at Premier Doug Ford for that advertisement that has caused him so many difficulties recently, is trying to strike a balance. On the one hand, Canada under Carney, but before as well, is trying to diversify its economy so that it's less dependent upon the United States. Strategic autonomy might be the word that your viewers it would resonate with your viewers. So he wants a good relationship with the U.S., that's important, an economic relationship with the U.S. But he also is looking to diversify away from that relationship, and that's where the Indo-Pacific comes in, looking to do more business with China, for example, but also the Philippines and India and Indonesia and South Korea and Japan, et cetera, looking for new investment opportunities and new sources of investment for Canada as well. So striking that balance is what Prime Minister Carney is all about on this first Asian trip of his. And it remains to be seen whether he can pull it off.
And what are the potential risks and benefits for Canada in resuming trade talks with the United States while pursuing trade talks with other countries in Asia?
Right. And the other countries, to be clear, the other country that matters in this respect is China.
Yeah.
China has a large diaspora in Canada. China has lots of investments in Canada. China purchases things from Canada. The Canadians don't want to lose that relationship. So striking that balance in this era of great power competition between the US and China, inching towards China can be perceived in Washington as inching away from the United States and vice versa, which is why I say it's a very delicate balancing act. Clearly, there are economic imperatives for Canada to repair its soured relationship with the People's Republic of China, Beijing. But it can't be too overt or blatant about it in this moment because President Trump and his supporters are likely to view that as abandoning Team USA, and that's not going to go down very well in Washington.
Right, as it's so sensitive. And now looking at the Philippines, how could a free trade agreement with the Philippines impact Canada's economic and political position in Southeast Asia?
Well, as part of a bigger picture, it's important. Again, pardon me, a large Filipino diaspora in Canada, which is increasingly influential. But Canada needs to diversify its global trade arrangements. It can't be as dependent upon the United States as it has been for the last century plus, because for all the reasons we've seen, when the United States gets angry at Canada, it has all kinds of levers it can pull to inflict pain on Canada. So diversifying, the Philippines is not going to be a game changer, but as part of a bigger picture, a bigger strategy, it could matter. If you put the Philippines together with better relations with South Korea, with China, with Japan, with Australia, India, all of the countries in the Indo-Pacific, then the dependence on the United States economically goes down a little bit. And if you can do it under President Trump's radar, that would be a very good thing indeed.
Thank you very much, Professor Andrew, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, Venezuelan opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez is backing action against what Washington calls the Cartel of the Suns. The group is said to be a criminal network allegedly led by President Nicolas Maduro. Speaking in Madrid, Lopez has said that any U.S. military intervention would target that cartel and not the Venezuelan people. He has also accused Maduro of trying to silence him after the government moved to strip him of his citizenship. Lopez has said that most Venezuelans support international efforts to confront the criminal groups tied to the regime. He has also criticized Colombian President Gustavo Petro, accusing him of backing Maduro. Lopez has compared the situation in Venezuela to a narco state, saying that Maduro continues criminal operations while holding power. Let's listen into Venezuelan opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez.
Por eso reitero, no es a Venezuela, no es a Venezuela, es al cartel de los soles. Y mi respuesta clara, tajante, es sí, sí estoy de acuerdo con que se hagan todas las acciones necesarias para neutralizar al cartel de los soles y a quien lo encabeza, que es Nicolás Maduro y Diosdado Cabello, porque hay que meter. Nosotros hemos visto estudios de opinión en donde hay una inmensa mayoría de los venezolanos que están apoyando lo que es el despliegue de los Estados Unidos en contra del cartel de los soles. Es una aspiración. A mí me están quitando la nacionalidad por decir lo que pensamos todos los venezolanos, que es que por supuesto vemos con esperanza este despliegue en contra del cartel de los soles.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Now looking at this, how might Leopoldo Lopez's support for international intervention affect opposition politics in Venezuela? And do you think this could lead to U.S. or President Trump supporting him?
Well, it has to be said that the Venezuelan state is not only corrupt in the normal sense of that word, but this cartel is deeply embedded in that state. and President Maduro is wrapped up in that as well. So when the Venezuelan Nobel Prize winner Machado comes out in favor of President Trump and against Maduro and calls for some kind of intervention, it's clear to me that many amongst the Venezuelan people would welcome such a thing. Here's the problem. It opens up a Pandora's box. It opens up real questions about legitimacy on the part of the U.S., unintended consequences, compromising Venezuelan sovereignty, the sovereignty of the Venezuelan people. I mean, it is fraught with all kinds of potential downsides. And yet it's quite clear that that state is corrupt and that it's not serving its people, and that the things that it is doing are inviting American intervention right now just in the Caribbean, but perhaps on the ground as well, and not just in Venezuela, but in the region more broadly.
And what are the potential consequences of U.S. military action against the cartel of the Suns for Venezuelan civilians?
Right. Well, in any military action, unfortunately, as we learned in Gaza, civilians are wounded and killed and dispossessed and dehoused in any kind of military activity. So right now it's limited to the sea, but we've already seen some innocent people killed by American naval action on the waters of the Caribbean. Imagine for a moment there was a land component to this, that the United States began bombing land targets, or God forbid that it actually mounted an invasion. Civilians are the ones who suffer disproportionately in that kind of war, because it would become a guerrilla war very quickly. And we know from historical experience how bloody that can be for the innocent civilians who are caught between the warring parties. Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Andrew Latham, for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we stay in the region. Hurricane Melissa, now a powerful Category 5 storm, is bearing down on Jamaica and is forecasted to be the worst storm in the island's history. Dangerous winds, rains, flooding and storm surge are in the forecast, with the worst of the destruction unfolding from noon today to noon tomorrow. Forecast reports suggest that the landfall is expected late Monday night or early Tuesday morning. The strongest hurricane on record to make landfall over Jamaica was Hurricane Gilbert in 1988, a Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness ordered mandatory evacuation orders for Port Royal in Kingston and 6 other vulnerable areas across the country, including Old Harbour Bay. Let's listen into what the Prime Minister of Jamaica has said.
By all assessments of the current situation, while we pray for the best, hour by hour, it is becoming apparent that the impact of Hurricane Melissa could be greater than Hurricane Beryl, certainly in terms of rainfall and flooding. We can lessen damage and speed up recovery by taking preparatory and precautionary measures before the impact of the hurricane. It is expected that Hurricane Melissa will make landfall on Tuesday.
U.S. seismologist has said a shallow magnitude 6.5 earthquake hit off the coast of the French overseas territory of Guadeloupe, with no damages or injuries immediately reported by authorities so far. The U.S. Geological Survey has said that the epicenter of the quake hit around 160 kilometers east of the Caribbean island at a depth of 9 kilometers around 8:30 a.m. local time. Authorities have issued a tsunami warning after the initial tremor, which has been followed by several strong aftershocks. And that's a wrap on America 360. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.